Thank you. Good morning. Thank you very much for coming. It's been such a pleasure getting to know most of you in person. And I'm super excited to present a part of my culture, really. I was born in Cuba, so this is really very, very close to my heart. I'm presenting today a lecture recital on the music of Ernesto Lecuona. And I entitled the presentation Piano Portraits of Cuba, because I really think that he represents two of the main pillars of our music, which are the Spanish side of our music and the Afro-Cuban side of Cuban music. In this lecture, I will be discussing the historical context, biographical information, the musical elements present in his piano music, and my own considerations regarding pedagogical applications and performance practices of Lecuona's music for piano. I will also perform a selection of pieces that belong to two different cycles of dances that he composed for piano. One is the set of Afro-Cuban dances, those are 6 dances, and then the Suite Andalusia, which is based on flamenco music, so it's very related to one of the presentations that we had yesterday by Dr. Marina. All right. Okay, so this is Ernesto Lecuona. He was born in 1895 and he died in Spain, in fact. He died in 1963. He died actually in the Canary Island when he was in a trip just there to visit his relatives. So it's, unfortunate, but yeah, he died fairly young. Oh yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Okay, so Ernesto Lecuona was born in Guanabacoa, which is a very iconic neighborhood in Havana. It's a neighborhood with a long tradition of Afro-Cuban music. Most of the population there was formed by descendants of enslaved people from Africa, so they have a very strong culture in that regard. He was the son of a Cuban mother and a Canarian father, so already you can see that blend of cultures in his own family. And this dual identity, Cuban and Spanish, would be illustrated later in his musical style and his catalog of compositions for piano. Now, in terms of the historical context, a little bit of historical context of what was going on in Cuba. As I mentioned before, he was born in 1895, and that is a very important year for the history of Cuba because it marks the beginning of the independence war that eventually led to Cuban independence in 1902. So the Cuban independence war actually lasted for 3 years, and then it was followed by a brief intervention by the US. The Republic of Cuba was actually founded in 1902. So at the end of the 19th century, we see many composers in Cuba attempting to create or promote a national identity in their music. And some of the most important examples that I would like to mention are Ignacio Cervantes. He composed 40 dances for piano. They are very short dances, and I may play one of them because it's really short. And then we have Eduardo Sánchez de Fuentes, who was a composer mainly for voice and piano, and he has like hundreds of songs for voice and piano. His most famous one is Habanera 2, and in the title you already see the genre Habanera, which became very prominent not only in Cuba but also in other countries. So those are the rhythmic patterns that we see in many of those compositions by Cervantes and Eduardo Sánchez de Fuentes. Those rhythmic cells became really prominent in the 19th century in Cuba, and they sort of formed the musical identity of our nation. So some of the rhythm, we can clap some of those cells. In the melody, in contradanzas, you see a lot of those. It's very common. And in the bass line, you have that syncopated bass line that later on we named it tresillo, actually, and there are different ways of writing that rhythm, but it's that's one of the ways it's written. And then on the other side we have the habanera bass line, which is the and that went to Europe. Thanks to Bizet and Carmen, it became pretty famous. But anyways, those rhythms definitely influenced Lecuona. That was sort of the sonorities that he was in contact with when he was a child. So the next thing that I would love to do is just play one of those dances by Ignacio Cervantes. It's a beautiful dance, Los Tres Golpes. And you'll be able to identify some of those rhythmic cells in this dance. So. So it's very fresh music. Some of those dances actually were based on like popular stories. There's a very funny dance that is called El Velorio, which means the funeral service, and it represents sort of a funny story where people are gathering in a funeral service, but then they start chatting and gossiping actually around the person who is deceased. So it becomes quite funny until someone says, "Hey, we're in a funeral, like don't say those jokes," and then it becomes minor again. It's a really funny story. So anyways, this is just to show you guys how the Cuban music in the 19th century was already becoming very distinct in its identity. And what Lecuona did later on at the beginning of the 20th century is that he took that to the next level, and he created a very distinct Afro-Cuban style, especially in his set of Afro-Cuban dances that I will present next. So some of the traits that he tried to represent in those Afro-Cuban dances come from the percussive side of Afro-Cuban music. So he imitated the sonorities of the drums in certain Afro-Cuban traditions. This is pretty clear in the first of the dances that I will present today. This is a pretty famous dance by him, and this is the earliest composition that belongs to the set of the 6 Afro-Cuban dances. He was only 17 years old when he composed La Comparsa. So La Comparsa could be translated as the carnival procession, and it sort of represents a carnival procession where the crowd is coming from far away, so you hear the distance, the distant dance, and then it becomes closer and closer, so it gets a little louder, and then he adds some octaves and thickens the texture a little bit, and then eventually the crowd just continues with the procession, so it fades out at the end. It's pretty interesting. So you already see some syncopation in the bass, and that's one of the features of Lecuona's music. It's present in most of his Afro-Cuban dances. So it's very common to see a syncopated bass line accompanying a melody that eventually grows with octaves. That's sort of his trademark in the Afro-Cuban dances. So let me just play this Afro-Cuban dance. It's the shortest one in the set. So those are the titles of the 6 Afro-Cuban dances. And in fact, he did not conceive the cycle as a cycle at the beginning. He composed those dances in the span of like 20 years. So he started composing them little by little, and then eventually he realized, well, it's a cycle of 6 dances. So, and he really liked the number 6. He has several cycles of 6 dances, like the Spanish dances that I will present next. Also, he has a set of 6 Cuban dances that are not necessarily Afro-Cuban, just Cuban dances. So yeah, he had some special love for that number, definitely. So the other dances in the set are Danza Lucumí, Danza de los Ñáñigos, La Conga de Medianoche, Danza Negra, and Y la Negra Bailaba. So I would like to explain a little bit of those titles because some of those titles are really hard to translate in a single word in English. There's like no single word for Lucumí, for instance. So it's kind of complicated, and that's the reason why in many American editions of this music, you find that some of the titles are actually not even translated, just a few of those. It's just really hard to explain that in a single word. So, all right, so the first one that I would like to explain is Danza Lucumí. Okay, so, I find it here. So the term Lucumí refers to a lexicon of words and short phrases derived from the Yoruba language, and they are used for ritual purposes in Cuba. So it's related to the Yoruba religion, which is an Afro-Caribbean, I would say, Afro-Caribbean religion, very prominent in not only in Cuba, but also in Puerto Rico, even in Brazil, actually, and maybe in Colombia, not sure.
We have I've heard of Lucumí as a last name.
Yeah. So yeah, they have it. But so you see, it's a complicated word, but it refers to this tradition and religion, that specific religion. Then we have ñáñigos. That's another term that I will explain. So ñáñigos is another side of the Afro-Cuban religion. It's also called abacua. And it's a secret, actually it's a secret society for only men that was founded in the 19th century, and they do, well, secret rituals. They dress up with masks, and it's a very mysterious, actually, sort of society. So they do a lot of percussion in their rituals, so that's why he sort of used those rhythmic cells in that dance. La Conga de Medianoche is a little bit easier to translate, so it's a midnight parade, basically. And then Black Dance, Y la Negra Bailaba, so it's maybe could be translated as And the Black Woman Still Danced. All right, so another interesting thing, so this is sort of the costumes. Those are the costumes used by the ñáñigos, or the abacua that I mentioned before. Yeah, it's very distinct, right? So La Conga de Medianoche is the one that I will play next, and it's very special in the set because in this dance, Lecuona actually kind of used some of the modernist trends that come from Europe, from the avant-garde in Europe. So he kind of explored bitonality in this dance. So you will see that the right hand is playing on white keys and the left hand is playing on black keys for most of the piece. This is something that we saw in Stravinsky and in other Latin American composers, actually, like Villa-Lobos or in Ginastera. And it's quite interesting that this is the only dance where he uses those types of modernist trends, really, or yeah, compositional devices, right? And the use of dissonance in this particular dance is just with the purpose of emphasizing syncopation, basically. It's just creating that percussive sound that represents the conga. So there's an important clarification. There are two different meanings to the word conga. So in one sense, it means a percussion instrument that is named conga, like the name of the instrument itself. But in this context, that would be the other type of meaning of the word conga. So conga refers to the group of musicians, street musicians, that would lead the carnival processions, especially in Santiago de Cuba, which is in the eastern part of Cuba. It's like the second largest city in Cuba. That's where those congas are more prominent in our culture. And they are accompanied by trumpets, drums, even frying pans. They use frying pans like as percussion instruments. So let me show you just the beginning, so that you see how he used. I don't quite understand why he uses a key signature at the beginning. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me at the very beginning, when all of the keys are black keys on the left hand. But eventually, I think he sort of uses a little bit of the G pentatonic scale. So that may be the reason why he decided to just start the piece in G major. But yeah, a lot of syncopated rhythms. It's a pretty cool piece. So that's what I'm playing next. Thank you. All right. So the next thing that I will do is I would like to present actually the remaining 4 dances in the set. Danza Lucumí, Danza de los Ñáñigos, Danza Negra, and Y la Negra Bailaba. Some of the common, I think, elements in those remaining dances is that he used a lot of ternary form. It's a very, common structure in Lecuona's music. So you would typically have an A section with a simple melody accompanied by a rhythmic cell of the percussion-related instruments in the Afro-Cuban traditions. Then that melody would become enlarged by octaves and chords, and then you would normally have a contrasting B section. Sometimes in that contrasting part you would have really virtuoso octave passages. That's like the case in Y la Negra Bailaba. That's the scariest one to play. It has a pretty like fast octave passage in the middle section. And this is a characteristic that was present in his music because he was famous for his ability to play octaves. He had a very large hand, which I don't have, so. But it's fascinating how he actually performed those pieces at the speed of light. It's pretty impressive. And then you have a recapitulation of the A section. That's pretty much the standard structure in some of those dances. And then another element that I wanted to point out is in terms of performance practice. Some of the traditions in the performance of this type of music come back actually to the fact that Lecuona performed these dances a lot in his recitals, and he took a lot of freedom with tempo, rubato, embellishments, adding embellishments to these dances. So this became sort of a tradition to not play exactly what is written in the score, and it's pretty accepted in academia even to embellish some of those melodies or do a little bit of rubato in the repeated sections. So it's something to consider if you're teaching this music at some point. Just listening to Lecuona's own recordings, which is fortunately is available actually for us. That's a great source to just become more familiar with this type of music. All right, so here we go. I think that's the last slide that I had for the Afro-Cuban dances. So. They are pretty fun, right? Very like you really want to dance to the music. It's very polyrhythmic and very syncopated, right? So I think these pieces are very useful actually in academia for educational purposes. So they could enrich the diversity of the of the repertoire offered in universities. Another thing that is pretty interesting with the dances is that you could use them as a substitute for an etude even. Some of those dances are really technically taxing, as you can probably tell, and if you compare that to an etude of octaves, it's pretty similar in many senses. So yeah, it's an interesting addition to the repertoire. So the next side of Lecuona that I would like to show you guys today is the Spanish influence in his music. And that is mainly represented by his set of Spanish dances, Andalusia, the suite Andalusia. And actually the last one of those dances is perhaps Lecuona's most famous piece, Malagueña. It's really beautiful. But the set itself, like the whole set, very well captures the essence of the south of Spain. So you can see a lot of influences of flamenco, and many influences actually of Albéniz and Manuel de Falla. Like we were lucky to have this amazing presentation yesterday. So many of the elements that Marina explained yesterday are actually present in this set. So the imitation of the castanets, the imitation of guitar textures, some of the harmonic progressions of flamenco. Yeah, you will see all of those. So as I mentioned before, Lecuona's father was Spanish. And not only that, but also, theoretically, he was actually Spanish born because Cuba was part of Spain when he was born in 1895. So he was technically Spanish when he was born. And there were so many Spanish people from the peninsula living in Cuba that all of the flamenco music was very present in Havana when he was born. So he captured those in this wonderful set of 6 pieces. As you can tell from the titles, some of those dances are inspired by specific cities in the south of Spain. That's the case of Córdoba. Malagueña is related to Malaga, so that's another city in Andalusia. Then the second one, Andalusia, is the name of the region, the whole region itself. And we have a very iconic building, Alhambra, which is the third dance. And I think he sort of describes the architecture by the use of dissonances. In my interpretation, those like little clusters of seconds in the third dance are sort of a representation of that intricate architecture of Alhambra. And then Gitanerias is related to the gypsy communities that were part of the flamenco style, while El Quibir is the longest river in the region. It's also the longest dance, by the way. It's in rondo form, and it's a little bit unusual in the set. Most of those dances are in ternary form, like we mentioned before in the Afro-Cuban set. So I think I will actually play the set, because it's a fairly long set, so I want to have the opportunity to play the whole set. And I would like you guys to really imagine you are in those cities or places if you have visited those. I have some, hold on. Okay, yeah, I have like some pictures relating to those places, so maybe that will help. you so much for coming, and I hope you enjoyed this little glimpse of what Cuban music is, especially in the works of Ernesto Lecuona. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dario Martin. Thank you so much for coming all the way from Alaska. He's right now at the University of Alaska in Fairbanks, and we really appreciate everything that you shared with us today. So.